Poke the Bear is brought to you by Prize Picks and the Gametime app.
And welcome into Poke the Bear, episode 252, presented by Prize Picks. Go use that promo code CLNS to get up to $100 cash back on that first deposit. And we're presented by Gametime. Go use the promo code CLNS to get $20 off that first purchase. Terms apply. You got a concert in mind, got a sporting event in mind, theater, maybe a stand-up act. I don't know any good stand-ups coming to Boston in the next month or so, but if there was, or if they're in your area, go to Gametime. So this is all the comedy you need. It's just me.
I was gonna say, people are all set with us. So they don't need anything like that.
They don't need stand-up acts. They have this. How are you, Connor? How's it going?
Evan, I'm doing well. How you doing?
Doing great. I just realized I didn't do the F. Marinofsky with Conor Ryan. Connor, what is up? So hope that's gonna throw the rest of the week off. You know, I think people are.
This episode's
like,
cursed now.
shit.
Everything we said we're gonna say in this podcast is now gonna go sideways. It's not gonna happen. It's all gonna happen. We're again. I think we've said this before, but we've hit the point in the offseason where a lot of speculative, a lot of mapping out possible scenarios. So who knows? Maybe this one's cursed, and all these things will or won't happen. We'll see.
You know what? I'm going to cause some chaos right now because I didn't introduce you correctly. We'll do everything that we say. The opposite's going to happen in this episode. So I will predict that Jeremy Swayman re-signs with the Bruins, no issues, at some point in the next month. So there you go.
There you go. Evan, I hope you have a shitty day. See, I'm in the opposite.
It's the opposite. There you go.
Yeah,
hope
exactly.
You have a shitty day
there
too, Connor. This is
Thank
perfect.
you. Actually, don't thank you. Screw you. All right, I'm
Exactly.
done. This is going to trip me up now. So
that's right. We're gonna have to talk in like opposite. It's like talking as like Yoda from Star Wars.
Yes.
I can't even do it correctly, so I'm not gonna try.
Match my offer sheet. You won't.
And that's a reference I do get. That's a reference I do get.
That was actually Michael Corleone, but
yeah, that was in the Godfather. I think.
Yes.
I think that was a classic. Everyone remembers that scene. Every year feels like the Bruins bring in a PTO or two. Last year there was Alex Chase on, Danton Heinen. Heinen obviously worked out a lot. Got himself a nice payday this year with Vancouver. There are some interesting veteran names out there. Kyler Yamamoto, Blake Wheeler, sort of the big two, at least around here. Do you anticipate the Bruins bringing in a PTO or two come camp?
I mean, it wouldn't be very surprising. As you said, they've done it last year, and that was a season where you had a lot of cap limitations, so you were kind of forced to do that in terms of bringing in some of these guys on, again, either very cheap deals or with the anticipation that they're going to have a cheap deal if they have a strong preseason. So would not be surprised. I think you look at this team. I think Bruins cap space still is the Bruins down for $9.3 million. And I know I almost said cap friendly. I don't know what they have calculated, but we don't know anymore. Shout out the Washington Capitals for fucking up our offseason. But
ruining everything. But
around 8 to 9 million seems to be the consensus of what the Bruins have. So you have to imagine a lot of that does go to Jeremy Swayman. But if you have any left over and you have the ability to sign a guy, it makes sense to bring in a couple of different players on PTO deals, see what you have left. Because again, I think you look at a lot of the depth chart on defense. I think you're all set. Especially, it's a few guys in the top six. Where Elias Lindholm and Pasternak and Marchand and Coyle and some of these guys are going. But you could make the case that, if you're looking for more of a scoring punch, especially with DeBrusk gone, and yes, you have, contingency plans between, bringing up a guy like Morgan Geekie or Trent Frederick into a more elevated role, or even, calling up or giving a guy like Fabian Lysell or Georgi Merkulov a legitimate look. You have options, but if you're the Bruins and I think you're leaving no stone unturned and you're trying to max out the value, yeah, it makes sense of seeing who's out there on the market, whether it's a Blake Wheeler, a Kyle Yamamoto, Max Pacioretty still out there, Tyler Johnson's still out there. There's a lot of guys that, listen, they all have concerns, right? Whether it's their age, injuries, what you're going to get out of these players. But if you're the Bruins and you're just trying to take a flyer on a guy and sign him to a PTO and see what you have, can't hurt, right? And so I think, I'm sure we'll kind of go through a couple of different options here, but I think it does not hurt at all if you're the Bruins to bring in a couple of these different players, see how they fit. And if all of a sudden you have a guy like a Blake Wheeler or a Pacioretty or a Tyler Johnson who's signing for a cheap prove-it deal and gets you 15 to 20 goals, right? Like, I don't think you're signing any of these guys the expectations that they're going to, maybe be what they were a couple years ago. But if you're able to find one of those guys that just gives you options, right? Like, maybe Lysell is great, but what if he isn't? Maybe Morgan Geekie continue to take steps forward, but maybe, what if he's best on the third line? I just think it doesn't hurt you if you're the Bruins and you're bringing in a few of these guys and just see what they have left in the tank. And if it works, great. If not, it's not like you really committed money or term or anything like that to bring them in and see what they have left.
Yeah, that's why I don't mind PTOs. I like them just because they're, you're not risking a lot. And one thing, John Sweeney's always preached is internal competition. Now, they already have a lot of internal competition there, especially in those middle six lines. We talked about the fourth line earlier this week with Johnny Beecher, where like there's 4 or 5 guys that have legitimate shots at that fourth line, but that middle six too, right? I mean, you can go down the list of just guys, Frederick and Geekie and Lysell and Merkulov and Patra. There's so many different guys, and there's guys I didn't even mention who are in the mix for those spots. But I don't hate bringing it. Like, we'll start with Yamamoto, right? Because Yamamoto coming off sort of a down year in Seattle, 8 goals, 16 points in 59 games. Yamamoto's small, 5'8", 153. This is not a big guy.
Sounds like an average guy from Southie. So
I was gonna say this. He would love Boston because it'd be tall here. But he's young. So a lot of these guys we're going to talk about are older, veteran guys. Wheeler, Pacioretty, even their best days are long behind them. I don't know what Yamamoto is going to be. I haven't watched enough of him to be like, I can project him as this. But I do know he's 26, so he is young. And there is that element too, where like Heinen was relatively young last year as well, where it's like you have a guy who, he had, his best season in Edmonton, 41 points 2 years ago. Then he put up 25 the next year in 58 games. So, even a smaller sample size. Things just really didn't work out in Seattle. I don't know if there's been issues or anything like that, but like age and a potential, 25-point guy. Like, I said this to Haggs earlier in the summer because he was asking me about him. That's one I'd say, yeah, like, why not try that? Just given the age.
Yeah, I mean, the Bruins have had a pretty good track record, right, of, putting guys in spots where, in new surroundings, they can really benefit. Even look at, like, Morgan Geekie, who I think, barely, what did he play, like 10 minutes and 30 seconds of average ice time? And I think...
Yeah, Seattle's taking forwards like, nope, we're not, you're not getting out there. Nope.
Not really an offensively gifted team, especially that Kraken team the last couple years as well. So you can make the case, and I would say, like, the one thing with Yamamoto is, like, is he just an addition of more of what you already have, which is like third line guys, maybe, right? Like, you've got a lot of Geekies and Fredericks, and that's not to say that like you bring in Blake Wheeler or a Pacioretty with the expectation that they're going to be in a top 6 role, but they at least have higher upside. That I think it's easier if they are healthy to project like 20 goals in a bounce back year for like a Pacioretty than like Yamamoto, who like could have a good year, could give you, 14 goals, 30-ish points and help out, but is that just kind of more of what you already have there? But in terms of what he brings, right, there's, skill, there's not size, but a lot of speed, which can kind of be a useful kind of addition to that bottom 6 grouping. So, yeah, like I would probably say compared to guys like Wheeler or Pacioretty or even like Johnson, maybe the upside or where you can kind of map out that makes him different from what you already have a surplus of, a little bit tougher to discern. But as you said, it's a PTO deal. If he's looking for a spot to land where he thinks he can get more out of his game and the Bruins can make use of him, there's a lot of appeal for what he could bring.
Yeah, and we'll get to Pacioretty in a bit, but I agree with you. And I think, you look at like what you'd hope out of Yamamoto, you would hope to get out of Lysell or Merkulov or Geekie, and I get that. But it is one more guy with maybe a little bit of a higher ceiling or more of an unknown factor. Could be nothing. The size worries me. 150 pounds in the NHL scares the crap out of me. I'll be honest. Like, I know he's, made it work so far, but that is a thing that would deter any team from signing a guy like that long term, at least, unless there's a high number of points. So I'm curious to see what team steps forward for him. I mean, Yamamoto probably would make the most sense. As much I like the age, but it'd probably make the most sense for a team that is that's rebuilding. That
could give him
let's take a flyer on that.
16 minutes a night or something like that.
Yeah, like give him time, give him a surefire spot in the middle six. That probably would make more sense. Whereas with the Bruins, like he would be fighting for a roster spot. So from his perspective, I don't know if the Bruins would make the most sense at 26 years old. Like Heinen, it made sense because he, played here. He played for Montgomery at Denver. Like that, there was a lot baked in there. But Yamamoto, I don't know if that makes a whole lot of sense for him. I want to get to old friend Blake Wheeler, former Bruins legend. Blake Wheeler, who went the other way in the Atlanta Thrashers trade for Bruins legend Rich Peverley. We'll get to that in a second. First, though, quick word from our friends over at Prize Picks.
Team USA's run in Paris has come to an end, but rejoice, sports fans, because football season is about to begin. And there's so many ways for you to get in on the action and win up to 100 times your cash on Prize Picks, as you and the world's best players take the game to a new level on the court, baseball diamond, gridiron, and much more. Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. With Prize Picks, you can turn $10 into $1,000 in a single game watching your favorite sports this fall. You can make a Prize Picks lineup in less than a minute. You just need to pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you're locked in. And unlike other apps, on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Preseason football is underway, but you can pick more or less on 2024 season stats already on Prize Picks. Will Patrick Mahomes throw for more or less than 4,300 yards? Will CJ Stroud's sophomore season result in more or less 4,150 yards? Enter your season picks before week 1 kicks off. There's really no shortage of ways to participate in Prize Picks. This football season, I'm picking Tyreek Hill for more than 1,376 yards and Saquon Barkley for more than 1,050 rushing yards. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. Prize Picks. Run your game. Now, let's get back to the show.
So Blake Wheeler, 38 years old, I believe, right now. He was 37 last year, so I'm assuming he'll be 38 at some point this year. I'm on hockeyreference.com, and apparently they don't have the date of birth on here. I thought they did.
I have noticed that, yes.
Oh, I had to click an arrow. So he's 37 still, but he'll be 38 by September because he turns 38 on August 31st. There you go. 2 years ago, had 55 points. Year before that, had 60. Had 91 points 2 straight years. From 2017 through 2019, he was 31 and 32. Much different times. Last year, dealt with injury, had 21 points in 54 games with the New York Rangers. Where are you with Blake Wheeler?
I mean, again, if it comes down to like a PTO and what he could bring there, I don't see really the harm in it, right? Like, this is a guy that, if you're expecting to be a 60,
the what?
The harm.
The harp.
I mean, I think you look at just where he is, right? And you look at the production last year. As you said, dealt with injuries last year with the Rangers. Even if he's fully healthy, I think he's maybe more of like a 40-point guy. Not really like a goal scorer, which maybe like that also changes where you'd want him. But the vision, the passing has always been there with a guy like him at his size. Again, I think Bruins fans who have seen Blake Wheeler know like the size doesn't necessarily correlate to how he plays. He's not like, if you were a Bruins fan who jumped in from like, 2017 or you started watching like a little bit later on, you're probably like, oh, this guy, they got Zadorov, they got Blake Wheeler. Doesn't really play that way if you watch how he
Justin
plays.
Brazeau.
Yes, exactly. But if he is healthy and you're putting him in a spot where, again, it's kind of like a James Van Riemsdyk, where if he just plays his game, you put him around maybe elevated line mates, you can get something out of him. Maybe that's 35 points, maybe that's 40 points, maybe he's cashed, right? But if he's willing to take a PTO and you're looking for a guy that, maybe he's more of a third liner, but if you're just looking for that missing piece in a top 6 spot with a guy like, Marchand and Coyle, you need another playmaker there who can put these guys in good spots. Maybe you see what you have there. Maybe it's, again, well, I think touch on it later on, but maybe it's still Lysell, it gives you the best chance, but having a guy with that resume, if he's willing to take a PTO or a very cheap deal and kind of reclaim his value, there's something to be said about what that upside and what that resume could do for a team that doesn't really have a lot of, cap space or leeway to, sign these guys. If he's out there looking for like a 1-year deal at $2.5 million, Bruins aren't going to do that. But if he's looking to reclaim his value, I think it's intriguing. At the very least, it's intriguing. It's something that if you're the Bruins, you shouldn't. You should leave no stone unturned when you're looking at just guys that can help you in more of that defined middle 6 spot. And I think a guy like Wheeler at least has that potential even at this stage of his career.
Yeah, and I mean, again, if he's looking for a cup, this would be a pretty solid spot to also, potentially end your career with the team you started with. Now, again, I know he was on that 2010-11 team. I forget if they put him on the cup. I don't think they did.
He played like 58 games.
He
so
did. He played like
be.
Over half the year with the Bruins. So I don't know I don't know the rules with that. I forget. But at any rate, wants to hoist the cup at least on the ice or whatever. This wouldn't be a bad spot. You also look at that second line right wing spot. 2 years ago, he fills that on any team.
Oh, yeah. Immediately, yeah.
So that's the thing where it's like, maybe you catch a little lightning in a bottle with Wheeler in this season, get him on a PTO, and he fits on that second line. Now, again, he also easily could not, and easily could just not make a lot of sense. And, he's too slow, or the injuries have hampered him down and age has hit him. But, as late as 2 years ago, vision, the points, that would make a lot of sense. So that's another one where it's like if they did it, I'd be like, let's see it. I'm not opposed to it. I think that's the thing where it's like, let's see it. I think the same can be said for Max Pacioretty. And Pacioretty never had the point ceiling that Wheeler had. But again, Pacioretty does scores goals better than Wheeler does. And at the same time, also has dealt with injuries over the last, couple of years, been bit by the injury bug, didn't really work out in Vegas, Carolina, was with Washington this past year. I think that falls under the same category. Wheeler, obviously, Pacioretty's a left wing, so I don't know exactly where the fit would be, because that left side, again, if you're putting Zacha on the left wing, you got Zacha, you got Marchand, you've got Frederick, potentially Merkulov, you have a lot of left wings there. I don't know if Pacioretty fits in. But the idea of a veteran Van Riemsdyk-like player, again, I'm not opposed to that. If you want to try.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a lot tougher to kind of project it. If he was a right wing, then it would probably make even more sense, right? Of if you're looking for a guy that can just, if he's healthy and has a reasonable bounce back year, could give you 15 goals, 20 goals, falling ass backwards, right? Yep. If he's healthy out there, there's that appeal. It's a little bit tougher to project where he'd be, especially in a top 6 role at left wing, right? But a guy that, again, if he's looking just to reclaim his value, and he's had just shit luck in terms of injury, right?
Yeah.
He tore his Achilles before the start of the year, right, with Carolina, and then came back, played 4 games, and tore his Achilles again.
Had 3 goals in those 5 games, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a thing. Even, and then last year, it's all right, you have 2 Achilles tears in that short amount of time. Played 47 games with Washington last year. Only had 4 goals in 47 games. Had 23 points, so there's still something there. Again, if you're trying to take a flyer, I don't think there's any harm in it. But in terms of the fit off of where he'd be in this lineup, a little bit tougher to project. That's why you look at a guy like Wheeler and you could say, all right, as a guy that's a right wing and setting reasonable expectations. Could you see Blake Wheeler flaming out? Yeah, of course. Like, I think you have to be guarded against those things when a guy is that age on a PTO deal. But could you see him being a guy that could give you 40 points? Yeah. And I think, like, in the right situation, a guy like Pacioretty could do that. It's just, would it be here when you look at who's at left wing in front of him, right? I think that's what you'd have to contend beyond the obvious question marks as to how much he has left in the tank. Can you get 20 goals? Can you get 15 goals out of him too? Like, I think that's kind of the main question mark with him. That's where he'd fit if he was willing to come here on a PTO or a really, really cheap deal.
Yeah, I mean, if he were to come here, you'd have to think maybe the Bruins, and he worked out and he was healthy, it was like, all right, well, this is a potential top 6 winger. I guess in that sense, you probably would keep Zacha down the middle, and you'd be just an older team. You'd have, like Patra probably goes to Providence. You have Lindholm, Zacha, Coyle down the middle. Geeky might go to the wing. Like, then you're a completely different team. So I think that does change some things. I think it kind of hurts some development of younger players like Merkulov, Patra, Lysell, kind of coming in and trying to make an impact. It's sort of like the transfer portal we're talking about, where it's like, I don't want to bring in this vet who really hasn't worked in his last couple spots and hurt some recruits. I'm dealing with this with college football 25. UMass, by the way, we've won a national championship. We've won a national championship. Year two of the Marinofsky tenure. Wow. In the last 2 years, we've at least been in the college football playoff. I've had a tough time getting through the gauntlet, but we're getting from some 4-star recruits. Yeah, I mean, I wish we could rebuild the football stadium. That's the one thing.
It's just stuck at McGurk. It's just
stuck at McGurk. It's the Oakland Coliseum of football stadiums. I liked who was it? Who was that guy who went in there recently and said, like, this is the worst football stadium in college football? I think it was the guy who goes in places and tries to stay as long as humanly possible. You know who I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, I've heard of that guy. He tried doing it like Fenway too, or something like that.
Yeah, Fenway. He did like
it's like Joe Mazzulla trying to rob Fenway.
Yeah. So, but he went. He went in there and ripped McGurk. Rightfully so. McGurk stinks.
Yeah. I don't want to be the guy. I feel like I'm throwing, stones at glass houses if I'm crapping on your football team, considering Boston University. Boston University undefeated since '96, but much going on since then. That'd be hilarious if they were in college football 25. It's just they're just playing a lot. Or they're playing over at Nickerson Field, and you can barely even it's a tiny it's just me in the stands.
My favorite thing is they don't have the FCS team, so they name them like FCS East, FCS Southwest. And when you play an FCS team, there's an injury like every play from FCS team. Like the FCS guys are just getting hurt like every single play. But they should be in it. At like Holy Cross, shout out Sarah, should be in it. I agree. I think it's ridiculous that FCS teams are not.
True.
Anyways, people are fucking pissed that we got off the hockey topics. They're like, man, they were going for like 15 straight minutes. You want to go to the game? You want to go to any of these games, especially football, right? Football's right around the corner. You want to go to a college game, you want to go to an NFL game, go visit our friends over at Gametime. Fall is beginning, which means football is back. Nothing beats a college football atmosphere. And with both college and NFL games, who doesn't love a good tailgate? Get to the game with Gametime. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. This fall, my friends and I are going to the Patriots-Titans game in Tennessee. And how will we get tickets for the game? Gametime, of course. The super deal has been amazing to us in the past, and there's no doubt it will be great to us again. I just love the curated deals, which make it easier to find the best price on great seats. Some other features I love are the lowest price guarantee, or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Gametime Picks curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, and theater. All-in pricing. Toggling this feature shows the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. So, download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Now, back to the show. So one of the big upside to Wheeler and Pacioretty is sort of that top 6 hope where it's like, oh, shoot, like still got a little bit left in the tank, can either score or set a lot of plays up in Wheeler's case. 2 other names, though, for sort of the bottom 6, Tyler Johnson and Kevin LeBlanc. Would you be interested in either of those guys?
I mean, I think Tyler Johnson could be an interesting guy in terms, especially I think if the Bruins have concerns over Patra and whether they think he's ready to be like set in stone 3C. A guy like Johnson could be like your veteran stop. He'd be your Jacoby Brissett if you're looking for that, right? Of a guy that could be 3C, can play on the wing as well, and can jump up when needed. I don't think you pencil him in on opening night in October to have him be a top 6 player, but a guy that could do that when needed. Obviously, kind of had his heyday with Tampa forever. He's been in Chicago the last 2 years. Last 3 seasons. Last 2 years have had 63 points in 123 games, so gives you 30, 40 points. Again, on some pretty crappy Chicago teams.
Oh, yeah. He was a minus 35 last year. And that, again, we're not big plus minus, but that just goes to show you how terrible that team was.
Yeah. So, maybe that's a guy that, again, compared to maybe a guy like Yamamoto, who, again, Johnson, I think is going to be 34. So, but in terms of like, you could project him, I think, being a 30-point guy on a better team in a role like that more than maybe a guy like Yamamoto. So that's really appealing. Kevin LeBlanc, I have no idea what to make of this man. This is a guy that, and then Evan, I think we've mentioned this.
Poor Kevin LeBlanc. He's gonna end up signing here, and that
yes, I know.
Like come back and get us. Like, yeah, we
I don't mean
that.
I don't mean that as like in terms of how he's playing. I just don't know what to expect. He's had such an interesting career, and as a podcast that I think we've said this multiple times, Evan, fully endorse guys getting the bag. So everyone who did not get the bag and fumbled the bag was Kevin LeBlanc, who had 56 points in his third year at 23, was due a new contract and signed a 1-year deal worth $1 million.
Yep.
Bad idea.
That's a fireable offense for the agent.
So, and again, he did sign, I think he was making like $4.5 million per year after that, and just the numbers have tailed off, but you'd like to imagine he would have locked into a stronger deal right out of the gate anyway. But you look at the last couple of years, again, really, really bad San Jose team, but 21-22, only played 21 games, 6 points. 22-23, 72 games, 15 goals, 33 points. And then last year on that dreadful team, 46 games, 2 goals, 7 assists, 9 points. Like, is he the guy that in 18-19, when he was 23, had 17 goals and 56 points? Or is he even a 30-point guy? That's a guy that I'm sure a team, I think, will probably bring him in on a PTO and see if maybe on a better team, not a team that is as cruddy as San Jose has been the last couple of years, maybe there's something to give. But if you told me this like 2 or 3 years ago when he was still like only a few years removed from that 56-point season, I'd be like, yeah, bring him in. Like,
that's
I feel like he'd be a guy that you could easily map out of being like, oh, he can get you 35, 40 points. Now I just don't know what to make of the player, but I think it would not be surprising if some team puts in a PTO for him. Right wing has had, a couple of good years in the past. Maybe there's more room to grow there, a new surrounding, all those kind of things. I just don't know if Bruins are the team that are going to do it, but he's at least would be in the mix if you're looking at PTO deals on a guy that has shown the ability to score in the past at the NHL level.
He is, and it's tough because both him and Johnson are probably more in like a Van Riemsdyk bottom 6 role. Obviously, for Johnson, it'd be more down the middle. But like, again, I just like, and this kind of segues into our next topic of like, would you rather just stick with what the Bruins have? Do you feel the need to have to go out and do this? When it comes to Wheeler and Pacioretty, like I'd be intrigued. Like I would be intrigued to see what they got. If there's anything left in the tank, if there isn't, all right, well, it's not going to take you a lot off the cap. Johnson and LeBlanc are interesting just because like, you look at what that third line probably will be, which is some form of Frederick, Patra, Geeky, Brazeau, like a potential Merkulov. Like, I want to see what you have there. And I want to see sort of what some of the kids can do. If you feel Potter needs to go to Providence, great, that's fine. But again, like then in that case, you'd have Frederick, Geeky, and Brazeau as a potential third line. That's given like Brazeau has a great training camp. So, that still remains to be seen. But going off of last year and what Brazeau showed you, like I'd probably rather have that be my third line, given that's what you have and that's the guy you went out and got. Now again, if Brazeau didn't progress the way he did last year and the scouting staff never went out and got him, well then all right, yeah, then a Johnson or a LeBlanc, I'd be like, all right, take a flyer on that, give that a shot. And then the fourth line, I think you're set with fourth line guys. So Johnson and LeBlanc, I'm not super huge on. Pacioretty and Wheeler, I'd be intrigued in. Yamamoto kind of falls in that LeBlanc category of guy in their 20s who seems to have lost their way. Maybe there's something there. I don't know if that's like the perfect thing for the Bruins. I'd be, if they take a flyer on any of these guys, I'd be like, all right, I'm intrigued. But again, I Wheeler and Pacioretty to me for this roster for what it probably needs, which is a little bit of offensive firepower. The potential for those guys to give it, I think, is a little bit more than guys like Yamamoto, Johnson, and LeBlanc.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think if you're bringing in one or two of those guys that have the resume and the previous pedigree, I don't think there's any harm in doing and harm, Evan, I don't think there's any issue with bringing in one of those guys to see what they can bring in one of those roles. But I agree. If it's like Yamamoto or LeBlanc or Johnson, I would rather you figure out finally what you maybe have in some of these younger players like a Brazeau or a Lysell or a Merkulov. And if they don't work out, like you still have Geeky and Frederick and some of these other players that can step into an elevated role. And if worse comes to worse and you'd rather have Geeky and Frederick on the third line and Lysell's not working out and you finally have clarity as to what he could be or what he isn't at the NHL level, check in at the trade deadline when guys who've scored 15 to 20 goals are all available on the market, right? Like, yep. I just think you do have a lot more options there. So I don't think you should go in with the roster intact. If there is a guy like a Wheeler or a Pacioretty willing to sign a PTO, I don't think there's any harm in doing that and bringing in one of these players to see just what they have left in the tank. But I also wouldn't flood your training camp roster with 3 or 4 guys that could be really redundant as to what they can bring. And more importantly, blocking out some guys that I think at the very least, we just got to figure out what these guys are. Like, is Lysell a guy that can play at the NHL level and can thrive in a featured role? Is Merkulov, can he bring anything? Can a guy like Geeky be more of a potential 50-point guy if you think he has more room to grow there, right? Like, I'd rather you find out those things as opposed to like we get to November and it's like, well, Yamamoto, like, well, see how he does up there. Like, if I'd rather you bring in a guy like Wheeler, see what he's got in preseason. You find out if the wheels have fallen off or not, and if it isn't, see what he can do, and maybe you have one more guy added to the mix. But I wouldn't go buck wild with 3 or 4 PTO deals and blocking a couple different guys. I think you want to just see what they can do at the next level.
I agree. I think, like for Tyler Johnson, I think if you're a contending team who needs sort of a third line center, I think that's a great spot to try him out in. And the other thing that I think fans have to realize about PTOs is there are reasons these guys are unsigned. Like, it doesn't mean that they're unsignable. Doesn't mean these guys are awful. But all of these guys have red flags, right? Pacioretty with his injury history, he's older. Wheeler is, going to be 38 years old when the season starts. Yamamoto has had his issues. Tyler Johnson, with Chicago the past couple of years, he's on the downturn. Kevin LeBlanc, as we said, just hard to, make what his career is going to be. And like, wouldn't shock me if Kevin LeBlanc goes to a pretty good team, plays with a good center, and puts up, 40 or 50 points next year. And it's like, oh my God, like, look at that. Like, could LeBlanc be Danton Heinen this year? I think absolutely he could be. But there's also the possibility that he isn't. I think you have guys in your system, on your roster, that, as we've said, we want to see what they can do. It's time to see what Georgi Merkulov can bring, what Fabian Lysell can bring. Can Matt Poitras be an everyday NHLer? Like, how much more has he progressed from last year after shoulder surgery? So, like, that's the other thing where you have that mini youth movement of moving that next generation in. I mean, those are your guys you drafted or went out and signed, like in Merkulov's case, signed him. Like, do you really want to be kind of muddying the waters with guys who have PTOs, like as you said, if you want to bring in a Wheeler or Pacioretty, great. I'm all for trying that out because I don't think that hinders the younger guys too much. But LeBlanc, Yamamoto, maybe they work out, but also like we're wondering those same things about Lysel, Merkulov, Patra, and a lot of those guys. So, but again, Sweeney loves internal competition. So it wouldn't shock me if he brought in any of these guys. It would not. It would not shock me if he did that to try and stir the pot a little bit if he feels that it needs to be. But again, they didn't do anything at the deadline to address losing DeBrusque. Like there was none of that. We didn't hear much of it at all, going for wingers. We thought like, oh, Duclair would be a really, easy option there. Not even that. So I think that's another example of just like, I think they're set with what they've got.
Or they want to find out what the clarity is there with some of these players, which is totally reasonable. There's something to say about that of figuring out. If we're in early December and Lysel's got 1 goal and 4 assists over 26 games and he's not showing progression, it's unfortunate. You wish that it would work out, or it's the same thing with Merkulov, but at the very least, you now know, all right, I don't know what we have in this player, or we do know, and he's not someone we can build around. Let's start checking the trade market when we get to February and March and seeing what is out there. Because, again, it's not like usually these guys are going for a premium for feels like 10-plus players every year at the deadline who can give you 15, 20 goals that are going to get dangled by some crappy teams. So you do have options, even if things kind of go haywire earlier on this season.
You do. Connor, what can people look forward to from you over at the Globe and Boston.com?
Yes, as we get ready for the start of training camp, I know captain's practice is right around the corner. Thank God. We'll have some actual stuff to talk about. We'll have you covered every step of the way over at Boston.com and the Boston Globe. So read all of my stuff over there. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can at Conor Ryan _93.
Go do all that. That's Poke the Bear. Conor Ryan, Evan Marinofsky, Poke the Bear listeners. Have a great rest of your week.